facilitate it by throwing the questions out at the beginning of each thing. I started doing homeschool assessments 28 years ago. And since then, I've done a lot of consulting, helping people create curriculums, helping people do all kinds of things. And so related to homeschooling. And so it's a pleasure to be here and encourage other people along this journey. And I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves. Laura, you want to start?
Sure. My name's Laura. I have 6 children. My oldest is 19. She'll be 20 in a couple of days. Next one down is 17. And then I have a 13 going on 14, 11, 8, and 5.
Wow.
Yeah. We've always unschooled.
And you're smiling.
Because Daddy's got them. I don't. Yeah. So, yeah, we've always unschooled, but most of that journey was in Chicago. So I lived there for 17 years, and then we moved here 4 years ago. So it's been quite an adventure. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So I do have a couple in college now. So if anyone's has any questions about how to make that work, basically, having done it, it's not a big deal at all. I think that's one of the things a lot of people worry about, like, how are we going to do this? It wasn't a huge transition, and I think Vermont makes it very, very easy to do. So that's not something, that I would want people to feel anxious or put off by any means. It's perfectly doable. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Julia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Julia. I'm in the southern part of Vermont. And I have a 23-year-old who is in Alberta, Canada now, and can't come home. and I have and she's doing some master's work. And then I have a 20-year-old who is doing college from home, which wasn't the plan, but that's what we're dealing with. Of course, I'm delighted to have her, but she's a second-year student at Castleton University. And I also, is it Lara or is it?
Laura. Yeah.
I also can, on the topics of what most people think is like the really scary thing, like homeschooling through high school and getting them into college, would love to help with that, and also, just, starting out and dealing with, the younger ones too. So I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for having me.
Patty.
Okay, I'm Patty, also southern part of the state. I have one daughter, began homeschooling her in the 3rd grade and homeschooled through the 9th grade. So she went to high school in the 10th grade. So I guess what I can offer is someone who goes out of traditional school, picks up homeschooling, and then ends up back in traditional school or whatever. Just that transition, that getting over the hump of, am I doing it right? Am I doing okay? Am I doing what I should be doing because it's not at all what happened in school, kind of thing, and answering some questions around that.
Thank you. And Rebecca, you're also our panelist, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good. I don't miss anybody.
I'm Rebecca Yam. I have a 13-year-old, and we've homeschooled all along, although she's always participated in part-time programs. And I've also been a homeschool teacher and consultant since 2003. So it's been a long time for me too. My business name is Open Path Homeschooling Resources. And I do end of year assessments, curriculum consulting. I've helped a lot of people get started homeschooling. I also do tutoring and some small group classes, and every once in a while a parent workshop. And I also teach at Pacham School in Montpelier, which is an independent school and homeschool center for ages 10 to 18. So that's me.
Fabulous. And Heather, are you, I'm not sure if you're officially on the panel or not, but would you like to introduce yourself?
I would like to. My name is Heather Kralik. I'm the outreach coordinator at the Kellogg-Hubbard Library, and I'm trying to reach out to those who are homeschooling so that I can pull resources. My background was I was a children's librarian in a pre-K through grade 8 school for 26 years. So I'm very familiar with curriculum and resources, and like to think it's one of my specialties to get to know my patrons and to pull resources for them, and to really, let's say you take the topic of fall, I would then expand a full spectrum of materials around that might be a nice branch off of that topic. And to do so, you should email me. I currently have 6 or 7 homeschoolers, and they're on a schedule. I pull books either weekly or bi-weekly, and resources would include books, audio, DVD, games, and puzzles. So if you're interested in getting resources from me, you should email me at the library, and we can talk about what your needs are, how old your kids are, your frequency, and you could give me an up-to-date as much as you like for topics. And I'm also here tonight just to hear about homeschoolers' concerns and needs, so that if the library can assist you in some way, I would be aware of them.
That's great. That's great. The question I like to start with is about socialization, because it's always so big. It's always something people really worry a lot about. And I think we're especially worried about it with COVID. We're even more worried about it. I wondered if the panelists, if we could go around and you could talk about what does socialization look like for you when you're homeschooling? Were there any ups and downs? Do you have any ideas for COVID specifically? Just kind of talk about socialization and homeschool. And anybody want to start? Any of our panelists?
I'll start. I know it's been very different moving from Chicago to, we first went to Burlington, and now we're in, central Vermont rural. So in Chicago, I could literally you can step outside your front door and you'd be in the street, and there are just kids everywhere, whether they were homeschooled or not. I could go to a park, I could literally look around the park and go, homeschooling mom, homeschooling mom, homeschooling mom, because you learn to spot them, right? So, I remember one day we're walking along, it's the middle of the day, there's this mum with kids, and these kids are jumping in the puddles, there's mud all over them, and I was like, oh, homeschooling mom. Because they don't have anywhere, I was like, oh, she's very relaxed about that. I was like, so it was so easy. I mean, there were times I would be in the park and September would roll around and somebody would come up to me and say, hey, are you Lara? Because somebody had told them that I, was homeschooling, and that it was, so my kids had school friends, but particularly my older two, my first one. And then we had an enormous homeschool community, yes, but an enormous unschooling community. So in the unschooling group alone on the north side of Chicago, that's 90 families. So that's what that looked like. And then we moved to Burlington. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted. I don't want to do this networking again. But I knew I had to, and I was in a smaller place now. I really needed to kind of suss out what homeschooling looked like. So I literally just signed up for everything and threw myself into everything. I was all over the place in Vermont, Mad River Valley, you know, Chittenden County, not back to school picnics. I mean, I know these people now, but it really was, I knew the routine and I knew how to find the people I needed to find, but that's only because I'd done that before. And now that we're more remote, it's the connections that I made, you know, early on in our kind of arrival to Vermont. So it is very much with homeschool people. And now we don't have any school friends per se. It's you know, just close friends in the community, or even going to the library. Rebecca Yarm, I knew about Rebecca before I even turned up in Chicago. I mean, in Vermont, because I Googled. I was like, there's this lady, Rebecca, she does this home pass thing. I was in the library, I heard someone say, hey, Rebecca, and I was like, bet that's Rebecca Yarm. And then I asked her, I was like, do you remember? And so I think as a homeschooler, I'd learned to be extremely outgoing in a way that had I moved states and my kids were in school, I think you put them in school and they're, you know, boom, it's kind of taken care of. Whereas I think as a homeschool mom, it's just a very intentional, active, I've got to get out there for the sake of my kids. So
Yeah.
That's my thing on, and I feel for the families that have suddenly had to come home from school, and it's just, whew, it's a lot. So, you know, but it's work. It has been work, and I yeah.
And I think it comes, at least it did for my kids. It really wasn't a huge deal when they were younger, and I didn't really think that socialization was as big a deal when they were younger as brick and mortar schools would like you to believe, because I found that kids wanted to do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got something that they were passionate in front of, it wasn't until, I would say, approaching their middle school years that I realized I needed to kind of open up their world a little bit. But when they were younger, I think this is a thing that parents worry more about than kids do. Because I think kids learn socialization through adults, not other kids. And that might be a pretty singular opinion, and I realize there might be a ton of people that don't agree with that, but it really wasn't an issue until about middle school, and by that time my youngest was doing something, you know, 4 and 5 times a week that she absolutely loved. So it was really more about getting her into something that she loved, and that's when she, you know, was hanging around with people, and so and I think it is important when they get into their middle school and high school years that they have these connections, because, you know, as much as we'd like to say we want to you know, have a lot to say about their inputs, there is this point where children, as they grow into young adults, they need to be with their peers. I struggled with that early on, because I was like, oh, all of this stuff that that I was trying to, I wouldn't say shield them from, you know, but I didn't want my daughters watching Disney when they were in 2nd grade. And I wanted to be able to expand their world, especially when it came to history. I didn't want the inputs that were the standard whitewashed history, and so, but I realized I had to let go a little bit as they got older, we accomplished that socialization through getting them involved in more deeply in the activities. It happened to be ballet for my younger daughter. She's the one who reminded me tonight. She said, I got my socialization when I went to ballet every week, and which wasn't, and she, I realized those resources aren't available to everybody. We got scholarships because there was always one of us unemployed. So, so yeah, I would say it's an issue that comes in maybe later because it's important to their development to form these relationships with their peers as they move away from you.
Regular public school is like an experiment, really, like that, because it's really only since the 60s, the last one-room schoolhouse in Vermont closed like in the 60s sometime. Like, to have all these kids of the same age in one group a lot, is it the best socialization? I think about it, and I think, or you said, Julia, you want to shield them from some things, some of that happens because they're all one age. The bullying, the stuff that can happen in the regular school, that kind of socialization can be pretty negative. So there's a positive and a negative socialization, so we have to
I wanted to jump in. I think Julia's right. I think in the earlier years it wasn't, I had there were abundance of people around me, but that idea of kind of shielding and protecting, I will fully admit that is what I did, and that's what I was looking to do. It's just that when I got to Vermont, my oldest was 15, and all of a sudden I realized there weren't a lot of teenage homeschoolers around. And I did say to him, I was like, do you want to go to high school? And he was adamant that he didn't. And that's when we tried community college, and that worked for him. And that's where he kind of got to try the waters, but he got to do classes he wanted to. And he was very clear about, he said, I don't want to go to high school. And I said, why? And he's like, I don't want to deal with the drama. And because he had friends that were in high school, he could see exactly what was happening, and he wanted none of it. But he was quite happy with community college. But I do have to say, now that they've all come home, I have seen him really blossom, and I really think I think we underestimate the amount of effort it takes to go out there and kind of, I don't know, I just feel that now that he's back home, he's able to take just a little more time to grow into himself, into his true self, without kind of putting so much energy out there that there's just not a lot of time for inner work and reflection. So Julia's right. I think that this socialization thing can be horribly overrated.
I'd like to hear Patty, because you had, Haley, in school, out of school, in school, and what was the socialization? What was that like with the transitions and with all that?
So early on, my daughter is going to be 29 in a few weeks. So it was a while ago.
That's amazing. I can't believe that. That's so, wow. You have a 30-something almost.
Oh, don't say that. Anyway, so in the beginning, in our little town, we had a tremendous homeschooling group already when I took my daughter out of school to homeschool her, which was a lifesaver because we had a group. And so one of the things I would recommend, if there are homeschooling groups near you, join them, and do what you can to put your stamp on whatever activity you're good at to share with other kids. That is how we survived it. That's how we built. That was the socialization. So the socialization was, in my view, the best kind, multi-age, including other kids' parents. So we had one member who loved going on field trips. So at least once or twice a month, we were in the car going somewhere as a group. And we got the best treatment at every place we went, and the best experiences, whether it was, so we would hike a mountain sometimes if that was what somebody wanted to do. But then we would go to Rokeby. That's one of my favorites, right? I loved Rokeby. I was just totally enthralled. We went to in South Burlington, they had the biosphere wastewater treatment plant. We went there. That was fascinating. You know, so there were just things, and I learned, and then, you know, but so we were going with kids of all ages. And then we had one of our people who was a professional musician. So she would do chorus for our kids. And another one had graduated with a master's or degree in history. He would do history. And so all the kids would go to someone's house and they would sit down and they would all learn whatever it was, you know, the history lesson, and they bring things home and they do like 3 or 4 weeks in a row or 6 weeks in a row. And so I think it was the intergenerational stuff that is so much more important in socialization than you can get at school, because everything in school is so regimented. And so, you know, if there's something that it's just so personal, because it's and then your kids are bonding together with the other kids, and you know, they're out in the back playing before, they're out in the back playing after, while they're waiting for mom or dad to come. You know, and the kids get to know you get to know the kids in a whole different way than you would if they just went to school next to your kid. And that is, you know, a bigger community building that we still enjoy as adults. You know, we still have those connections within our community. You know, there's 3 or 4 towns that we had kids from, and we still have those people that we know in those towns, and you know, can say, oh, how you doing? And you know, you're interested in what their kids are doing, and you see their kids, and you know, you see them doing well, and it's just so wonderful to see them. And they you know, it's just it was an excellent experience. So you know, in the beginning I was scared to death. But when I decided to let myself be all right with it, like take the pressure off myself for trying to keep my kid in a place that they didn't need to be, everything just worked out, you know? And when I sent my daughter back to school, I shouldn't say I sent her, she asked to go back to school. She took a test at school at the end of 9th grade to see if she was going to be ready to go into 10th grade at this school, or if she needed to go to 9th grade. And, you know, when she got done with the test, I was just like, what? Oh yeah, she's in 10th grade level in every single thing except for math. And we both laughed, and we knew that we were not surprised by that. But, you know, because that was something she could care less about and still doesn't care about, you know? So it's not forcing that stuff, you know? We would have fights over math, and then I decided to give that up because it wasn't worth it.
You became the queen of letting go. I mean, you were so worried at the beginning, you know, but then you became like the queen of, I was so impressed.
Well, and when I got to that point where she took the test, I was totally like, phew, that was okay. It was good. We did the right thing. And I will say this is kind of an interesting thing. She went to Long Trail, which is a very small school, so it fit her because we live in a small town, yada, yada. She'd never been in a big school situation anyway. And most of her teachers, especially her history teacher, because that's the thing that she loved the most, he could not believe that she was a homeschooler. She would go, no, I didn't go to school. No. He goes, you learned a lot of stuff in school. And she's like, no, I didn't go to school. That's why I learned it.
So Rebecca, tell us about your socialization.
Yeah, I have a very social only child, and we live in a rural area. So socializing was very much on our minds. And we also have really valued this sort of multi-age opportunities. We participated in homeschool groups, and one year was particularly great. We kind of started our own group around doing group projects with people that we thought would be interested in similar kinds of projects, and that was a great year. But also, because I worked part-time, she always has participated in some outside programs, which we also have gotten financial aid for. But those have been groups of kids and also multi-age kids. So, and we looked pretty carefully, especially when she was younger, for programs that did provide supportive communities and where there was a lot of focus on the community piece, and where the adults who were there had some skills for fostering positive relationships between the kids and helping them learn the skills to work those, you know, to problem solve social stuff. And having been a teacher in public school, I found that it was very hard to do that as a public school teacher, to help kids learn those skills, to the friendship skills. You just don't have time, and you're going in so many different directions. It's hard to sit down with a pair or a small group and really help them work something out. So in a homeschool group, you can do that because you're there. And, you know, she had great experiences with Earthwalk, which is a 1 day a week outdoor program that she's gone to from age 7 through 12, or through 13, actually. This is the first year she hasn't done it. And she still has good friends that she made there. And another of her really good friends now, so she's 13, another of her really good friends is an 18-year-old that she got close to at Pacham, but not through classes, through the student-led activities like Dungeons and Dragons and live action role play. So yeah, but so those multi-age opportunities have been really valuable for us. And her most fraught social relationships have been the ones from like theater activities with kids her age, who that's where all the drama's been. It hasn't been in the multi-age groups where they're just not all going through the same developmental stage at the same time. And so they bring different things to the friendships, and it's actually much easier than when you have a group of 12-year-old girls all together. So
I never experienced that. That's the one thing that really kind of blew my mind away, is that there was none of the girl drama with my girls. And I'm so thankful for that, because I got to be honest, I don't think I could put up with that at all in public school, and I would have had no or private school. So I've been lucky with that I didn't have, and it might be, yeah, I've been blessed. It's the one thing I didn't have to deal with, but I'm so thankful. I was actually doing a lot of homeschooling for that reason. Could I make one small comment, and then I'll stop talking about the socialization thing?
Sure. Yeah, get to Sue. Yeah.
Our family was, I want to encourage parents to not get tied up with if your child is a different type of kid, like if they're introverts. There's so much pressure out there from people around you. I mean, people who you don't even know will come up to you and say, you should do something about that kid being so shy. Please ignore all of that. We were a family of introverts, and which made things pretty interesting, but very intense introverts. And I was just blown away by perfect strangers coming up to me and saying, you know, you really should get them socialized. You know what? They're 23 and 20 now. There's no problem. It's like potty training. You know, you're worried that they're not going to get potty trained at the age of 2, and you just go crazy and you push it, and then you realize, and actually, Sue, it might have been you. I don't know. We were talking about this at one time. I'm trying to remember who told me this, but it blew me away. They said, look, they're not going to be 15 and not potty trained. All right. So just let it go. And so I just really, it's like, so I think the minute you take the focus off what your kid needs and you listen to people around you, especially people that feel like they need to say something to you for some reason, especially about the socialization. If you have an introverted kid, just ignore it.
Well, and
nothing.
I actually I don't like the word socialization because it kind of implies that you're making them fit in, whereas being social is something we humans want to do. It feels different. But the other thing your comment made me think of is that find those settings where your kid can be themselves. And that's the other thing that we really looked for when we chose programs and groups, is like, is this a place where they're supporting kids to be who they are, and not, trying to make your introvert be an extrovert, or the other way around.
Yeah.
When it lights them up. When your kid gets lit up by something, you can just tell, and that's where you want them to be. In those spaces that really.
Yeah. I could always tell when they would start talking really, really fast. My really quiet kids, I was like, that's something that lights them on fire. Like they would just be yap, 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 yap. And so I would take note. Yeah.
So Sue has joined us late. We're having some trouble getting her in the room. So Sue, if you could introduce yourself briefly, and then tell us a little bit about socialization with your 5 boys and granddaughter. Unmute. You're muted.
I am mute.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Hi. So I'm Sue Travers. I have 5 grown children, all boys. Oldest is 42, youngest is 20. Homeschooled all of them forever. Kind of early off to college. As Julia's kids, we started picking up classes for them at a young age at the local colleges. And one of the pieces I always said to people, and they said to me, but what about the socialization? And I would say to them, public and private school are exactly why I don't want them. It's not about the quality of education always. It's the piece that I do not want them experiencing that type of socialization. I want them to experience socialization out in the world in the circles that we can find that are appropriate for them at that age, and allows them to grow and blossom. And people would be kind of like with their mouth open, like, but what, you like all kids their age? And I'm like, no. I want them well-rounded. And being in a public or private school setting with all 10-year-olds all day long wasn't going to give me the social piece I felt they needed. So people would be like, oh, okay, they hadn't really thought about that before. But they say, are you doing it for religious reasons? You're doing it for, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I'm doing it because I want to do it for the social piece. And people would just kind of shut up at that point. The other thing about Julia, we were talking about the potty training. It was also about breastfeeding. Remembering people say, when are you going to stop breastfeeding them? And I finally got sick of it. Remember that? And I said, you know what? Have you ever seen one breastfeed in college? And if not, hey, it's okay. I'll breastfeed them, and then their wife can take over. Shut them right.
I was so tempted to say things like I'm pretty sure she'll stop breastfeeding by high school. Just.
So it's the same thing about so many things in life. Just let them move at their speed, at their pace, and some areas will be faster than others. But don't get upset about it. Don't worry. There's such big problems. Like I had my oldest one, and he had kind of long hair, and it wasn't real cool at the time, I guess. I don't know. I hadn't really paid attention. And someone said, oh, why don't you make him cut his hair? And I'm like, hair is not an issue. Like there's a lot of big issues in the world. Hair is not one of them. What he wants to wear is not one of them. Does he want to wear socks? He doesn't want to wear socks. Do they match? I really don't care. And it doesn't really matter. And 10 years from now, we're not going to know if he had striped socks on Thursday or not. It does not matter. And so I think it just allows our kids this clear path to learn when we take all those extra pieces and tuck them in a closet somewhere, and we don't allow people to drag us down thinking they need to wear the newest Nikes out. And then when they're in school, that's what they're hearing. That's the chatter. You know, do you have the most in style hip clothing or sneakers or jackets with a name on them? Our homeschooling group, and so I was pretty close with Patty, although I had kids that were, so I have like a 35 and a 36-year-old where she has a 29-year-old. So I had been in this Middletown group for quite some time beforehand. And our kids didn't realize that there were kids that got so wrapped up about what kind of sneakers they had on. Like our kids were like, I remember one time we were having our pictures taken on the green, and I don't know, I think you were there at that time, Patty. The kids took their shoes off and then they mismatched each other's shoes. One would have one person's shoe on another. So they all had like all different, one of each kind of thing. And we took their pictures that way in some leaves. It was the cutest thing ever. Like they didn't care because they didn't know that that was some of the drama and some of the clickiness out in the world.
Well, it's funny.
To this day, I'm sorry, I'm trying. My daughter does not match her socks.
Mine
To this
too.
day.
When you talk
Yeah.
about the matching of all of those things, I'm thinking that's really what you're talking about when you ask me about socialization. Are those kids going to conform? Are they going to do what everybody else is doing? It's not about the socks or the this or the that. It's
No,
like,
but
are
that's the
your
example.
children going to fall in line, right? And I think
Exactly,
with
right.
people, we just tend to kind of run, you know, against that current. And I think that unnerves people to some extent because
It
we're not
does.
here to do what everyone else is doing. And it's unnerving.
Just
Right.
because you're not you're unschooling or homeschooling, that unnerves a lot of people.
I think so.
Just,
Yeah.
then everything about you unnerves them.
Right.
I was once outside on the green of the Vermont College of Fine Arts in Montpelier with a bunch of Pacham students, so middle and high schoolers. And this random woman came over to me and said, "Are those homeschoolers?" And I said, "Oh, mostly." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, they're wearing snow pants." Kids that go to public school don't wear snow pants once they hit middle school.
Oh, wow.
And they're all out there playing in the snow wearing snow pants. Like, that's what you do when you play in the snow. It was so funny.
Right.
But I loved it. Like, yes, we want to be out there playing and doing things, not worrying about whether we're cool enough to, too cool for snow pants.
I think we could do
Exactly.
one topic, one question each week. What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, right.
I'm going to move us along a little bit. I hate to because it's so fun, but I'm going to combine the next two questions because I think they merge very well. And then it gives you each a little more oomph but talk about curriculum, because this is, and I'm pulling from the questions I've gotten from so many people who are doing this transition. These were these topics came from, but when you think there's such a broad way of doing it, like very much by a standard curriculum you buy, all the way to complete unschooling that, you don't even pick up a book most of the day. And within that, talk about your schedules as well. How did you make the schedule work? And whoever wants to. Julia, you want to start? You're right there on my right.
Oh. I should probably preface this that I made a choice for homeschooling for secular reasons. So this may not apply to some of the people that are, and so I'll just put that out there. It made it more of a challenge. We did not have school at the kitchen table per se, probably for the first until they were about 11 or 12, except for math, because my kids will tell you I was really a stickler about math or getting to higher order level math, and that was just a thing because I love math. But I was really bad at it in school, but found out I was better at it in college, and then the light bulb went off. So the curriculum, I'd say the overall advice I have is what may work one day may be totally thrown out a month later. You may not even get into it. There's so many different curriculums out there. And I would say for the first, up until they were about 11 or 12, it was libraries and books and lots and lots and lots of reading, and our Singapore math. I have to say we were pretty solid with that from beginning to end because that worked for them. They were visual spatial kids. So we didn't, Saxon math just made them run the other way. So so that was really the only curriculum up until they were 11 or 12. But other than that, I'll have to admit, if I could get it into a game, that was our curriculum up until they showed an interest to dive deeper. And if that was the case, then we just went to libraries. And I think I said this in the last panel. You know, we got library cards as soon as we could, and then found ways to get library cards in every name. And then I would let the kids take out as many books as they wanted. We'd even talk to the librarians and say, what's the book limit? They're like, well, we don't have a book limit. Okay, can they take 24? I mean, I literally would plunk them in front of a bookcase and just start pulling out books at the library. And they know what they want to look at. And so this was once a week. I mean, and we had, I think, 5 different libraries that we went to. So I just happened to have kids that well, I don't know. I think I wouldn't say that they, you know, loved books at first, although we always, if they didn't love books, I found a book they loved. Like my firstborn was reluctant to show us that she could read. I'm still kind of stymied about that. But she didn't want to let us on that she was reading. But once we bought her joke books for kids, she couldn't help it. Like the jokes were so funny. And this is when she was like 4 or 5. Like we knew she could read, but she didn't want to let on. But she couldn't hold it in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we really had no formal curriculum, and they learned all of their grammar, and we didn't have grammar workbooks. Those never worked. They learned.
If they're reading all the time, they're learning grammar because they're reading it.
Exactly. Yeah, we had no grammar workbooks, no vocabulary lists. They have huge vocabularies, and we never did vocabulary lists. I did try to get them to take Latin, but they wouldn't do it. So
I'm going to jump only because I want everybody to get in.
Yep.
Get something in. I hate moving along.
No, I said too much.
Laura,
could have said that in 3 sentences.
Curriculum and schedule.
We don't really use one. We unschool. When I first started, when I decided to homeschool, I don't think I even really realized there was a whole variety of curricula out there. I really didn't. What we had been doing since my oldest was 2 was we would go across the road to the library and we would just get books and come home. And then the next one was born and we would get more books and come home. And like Chicago has, I think, one of the largest libraries in the country.
Beautiful library.
That's what we would do. And then I think I got hold of John Holt and Gatto, those books. And because I stood there thinking, oh my gosh, this kid is 5. I'm supposed to do this thing and get the things. I'm not sure what these things are, but it has to hurt. It can't be this easy. It has to be harder than this. And I just remember looking at all these rows of books and I thought, well, what if the only thing these kids ever did was just slowly work their way through these stacks? Would that be so bad? For 12 or 13 years, if that's the only thing they did was come here, hang out at the beach, read some books, would that be the worst? And I can honestly say now, my older kids, they never took grammar or spelling, none of those things. And even my 17-year-old, I kept saying to myself, oh, I think you should write something. Because now we're in a state where you have to produce something. In Chicago and Illinois, you have no governmental oversight. So we kind of, you know, honestly, she barely did anything. She's now taking a composition class at college, and the teacher's just like, "You're an incredible writer. Where did you learn to write like this?" And I was just like, holy moly. But I seriously think it's just years and years of make sure you read across the board and read just rich, good literature. And that's the way they start seeing and thinking and speaking, and, you know, and that's kind of what we do. And the math thing, you know, I have a lot of math stuff around, math books. You know, we do Murderous Maths is like the horrible history books, but they're the math books, or we have Life of Fred, and then I can tell as the kids get older, I have kids like my daughter that's really into programming. So then I sit down with them, I'm like, if that's the case, this is the path you might be following. So you will need to do Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and pre-calc if that's something you want to do. And then that's up to you, them, and that motivation comes from there. But they're perfectly numerate up until 10 or 11, because you can't get to that age and not be. Everyday life is going to include math and basic operations. For me, it's just when it gets to that kind of higher math level, that's when I sit down. But then they're old enough to have that conversation. Right. And then I'm just like, wait, but the rest of it, live your life, do your thing. So scheduling, that hangs around breakfast, lunch, tea time, and dinner. And, you know, those are the
I love it.
And then everything else, please don't start a project at 10 p.m. at night. Please don't. Mummy will be very upset. But other than that, I mean, it's so true. What it is. And then everyone's happy. And then I don't have to. So there you go. That's
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I have to jump to Sue just because you're so unschool. I just think it's a great transition.
So I really love the part she said no projects after 10. I had boys.
I saw you laughing.
I'm like, they might fire up at 10 o'clock at night and decide they're building, you know, like, see so I'm going to show you a picture. I don't know if you can see it. Do you see that at all? But it's a drum. And they all made drums. They're really into drums at one time. So we made drums and stretched deer. Wow. But that was happening. Remember that, Julie? Like in the middle of the night, I can hear the sander, you know, their paper sanding. And I'm like, oh, good Lord, can they just go to sleep? But that was when they were ready to do it. And I just had to learn. I had to learn that part because we had all been schooled in public school. Yeah. So I had to learn that. Excuse me, I had my 85-year-old father here with a grandchild tonight. So my house is a little busy. But our days would look really like I would have, at the end of the day, I would sit back and say, what can I log in a journal? I kept a journal a lot because we were so unschooled. Yeah. I didn't want at the end of the year to go. There were so many things we did every day. You know, like, so this just passed by. So it was sort of Columbus Day, but now it's really not Columbus Day, but whatever. So I said to my granddaughter, okay, we're going to do salmon patties. We're going to make food that we would have eaten, you know, or the natives would have eaten. And so we used some tuna and some salmon, and we used some cornmeal, and we just kind of played around, and she made up some little recipes, and we had lunch. But at the end of the day, I have to sit down sometimes and put in a journal, because at the end of the year, I'll forget everything we did, which every day there's a huge list of things that we've experienced or seen or done. And the library's huge, but besides the library piece, just the hands-on pieces. So we went out to look for clay out of the riverbed because we have really nice clay here in Vermont in some of our riverbeds. So we went and gathered a bucket of clay. But those are, you know, it's talking about our environment and nature and actually how the natives made pottery. We did a lot of pottery, didn't we, Julia? For the kids, did a lot of pottery.
Oh, I've got boxes and boxes of pottery. I packed it all up for them for their first apartment.
Yeah. So we made like clay whistles. I mean, they're just imagination runs wild on things sometimes, and it's wonderful. So like we would spend sometimes I want to say weeks. We really would, in one kind of interest. And then all of a sudden we'd move on to something else. But a lot of times that came from things we had been reading from the library. And then they would
Right.
ask questions about it. And then we would follow through. Next time we go to whichever library, we're going to look for some more books. We'd pull more books on that. The only really structured book, and again, I was a Singapore mom as well for math. That's all I ever used for my boys. And so that was really our only kind of book that we would use at the table, or actually not even in a table. It would be up in a tree. It might be on a rock somewhere. Julia might come over. We'd be out by the pond, and the kids would be catching frogs, and then we might do something. Remember those days? Frog catching and looking at all the cute little frog eggs and talking about that, and actually finding the stages of life within the pond. And they'd go home and we'd go whatever, we'd do whatever. And we'd think at the end of the day, well, that was a huge lesson. Some things you won't find in a book. And that was really homeschooling, and that was really unschooling. And other kids in public school were just seeing it in a book, but we got to show them in a book that they might have found at the library. And then we'd take it one step further, and we'd actually show them this in real life. So
Yeah, it was a deep dive.
Really big.
Everything was a deep dive, which I
Yeah.
don't think they get in regular school.
Structured school.
And they get that passion knowing that they can do a deep dive. And I think that's really what my whole philosophy was, is if I could get them on fire about something and do a deep dive, that's really, and of course this changed, after they were 12, as Laura was saying, there did come a time when they and I wanted them to dig deeper. And I got lots to say about that, but I'll stop.
So Rebecca,
So I was always going for that deep dive too. My approach has always been very child-led, although we've never really been true unschoolers, I wouldn't say. But I've always been passionate as a teacher about student-directed learning, and I have a kid who does not want to be told what to do and knows what she wants to do, and is very creative and can be super self-directed. So I found pretty early on Lori Pickert's book, Project-Based Homeschooling, and that really kind of pulled together things I knew as an educator with what I wanted to do as a homeschool parent, and helped me see how to support her to go deeper with her passions and interests. So that was kind of the focus, and like the one thing we tried to schedule, because my family, well, the rest of my family hates schedules. So we have dinner together, but it's not at the same time every day. And, but we did schedule in these big blocks of time for project time. And even that sometimes was hard to get my kid to stick to. Even if she was excited about the project, she's doing something else. She doesn't want to put it down to go do project time. Why would you do that? But she was, we did things like, when she was 9, she wrote and produced and directed and performed her own play with some friends that she pulled in to be in this play with her. She had a lot of support. She was 9, but this was the kind of deep dive that we were going for. And then as she's gotten older, she's chosen classes at Pacham that she wants to take. So she's, the last couple of years, she's like this year and last year, she's done a lot of her academics there. And we've sort of filled in the gaps at home in one way or another. So last year, we pretty much unschooled social studies, read a lot of books and talked a lot about politics, and she did the things she was interested in. And whereas this year we're doing math together, and we're being more formal about it because she kind of wants to sort of keep up with kids her age. She has a notion of wanting to be doing certain things at this. So we're being a little, but we're doing some kind of co-created projects as part of it too. So you know, and we've always had like a weekly schedule that's been determined by my work schedule and like outside programs that we're involved in. But never had like a daily rhythm, although I think I would have liked, you know, a little more of one, like outside time and like certain things built in there rather than everything being all higgledy-piggledy. But that's what we got.
That's what worked for your kid. Like you said, you were child-led, so you did what worked.
Right.
Patty, you did both.
I did try to make her go outside every day though, because it's important.
It is.
Yeah.
We need a nature bath. We're learning that now, right? Patty, you did both, didn't you? You had like a more formal curriculum, but then you also went on school.
Yeah, in the beginning, I thought I needed to have a curriculum, and then found out quickly that that was just a bunch of crap because it didn't get done. I mean, it just didn't get done. It was all about me. There was nothing about her, and it was about trying to make sure that I was doing the things that I should be doing, not knowing that there really were no rules. So yeah, it was, you know, then we went to basically unschooling, and my daughter was always into books and writing. She would never let me read her writing, which was very interesting, until one day there was a piece on the table and I'm like reading it and I'm like, where did she copy this from? This is amazing. And she was like 11 years old and I'm just like, she must have copied this off of the internet or something. Then I'm like, where did this come from? And she's like, where did you get that? She was so mad at me. I'm like, why do you say that? She goes, well, I wrote it. I'm like, no, come on, you didn't write this. She goes, oh, yes, I did. Did you read it? I'm like, well, yeah, you left it on the table. Hello. But, you know, so it was that kind of thing. It was like what she was into. And it was you know, my kid was into weird things. This poem was about the Columbine shooting. She was 11 years old and she was totally fascinated by that. And she dove deep on her own, and then she regurgitated her feelings and her perception of the whole thing out in this poem. And I was totally floored by it because it was like, wow, you know, a professional wrote this. That's what I thought. She was 11. I'm like, are you serious? But then, you know, she ended up in college for professional writing, and she's not writing right now. Well, she is writing, but she hasn't, you know, she's not writing professionally yet. So she, you know, someday. But
she's gathering experiences.
That's what drove everything. It was her interest in something. Her what I'd like to think is I helped her figure out how to learn. Then she did the rest.
Yeah.
You know, if she was interested in something, she figured out how to learn about it, and she learned about it, you know, at 11 to the ability that she wasn't. And it was an ability that I didn't think she even had in that brain of hers, but she certainly did, you know, to understand it and comprehend it. And yeah, it's let them do what they do. I think that the groups were super helpful with scheduling. Our group, we had a really good group. Every week we had at Monday afternoon at 4:30 or whatever time it was, 4 o'clock, you know, it was chorus. So you went to chorus and then at 11 o'clock on this day, you always did this. And so that was scheduling for them. But and we did soccer, we played, you know, different things like that games that everyone would go to a certain place and just play. They were involved in some things in school that they were interested in, like whether it was soccer or softball, or in our case, we had a program at one time called Living History, which was the most amazing program in the world. And the kids the whole school would, you know, learn about a certain time in history, and then they would recreate it all throughout, from kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. And we would turn the whole town upside down with these costumes and, you know, times in history from within our town. And my daughter did it from the first year that they offered it, which I don't remember what year she was in school. It might've been 6th grade, all the way up till she was 14 years old. She was still doing it and going with the kids and doing things, because they encourage that. Like as an adult, adults were encouraged to come and be part of this week-long thing or 2-day-long thing, and it was amazing. To this day, she has a guy that the first year we were doing living history, and he was her father, you know, because in this group. So to this day, that's my other dad.
Welcome. So we've had a couple questions in the chat, and I want to address the one about showing proof of work for the end of year stuff. One of the options is to have a licensed teacher, and the other Rebecca does this, and I do this. A licensed teacher can come and talk to you, and if there's written work, you can look at the written work. If I usually ask kids to read out loud to me or say the alphabet, whatever they can do. If they can only read a couple words, it's fine, that kind of thing. But I totally believe in unschooling. So there doesn't have to be like these piles. Like people get so nervous, they're going to have to, you know, show up with these books or something. And no. Tell me what you do. And then we write up something and send it to the state for you. You can also send in a portfolio. And that's, you just grab some things throughout the year, some written things, take pictures of things. If you do pottery or whatever, you can take pictures of that and send it in, all those kind of things. Or they can do standardized testing. Rebecca, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. For the teacher assessment, people bring all sorts of things, or I did them on Zoom this past season, but normally people bring the things, you know, not only pencil paper work, but artwork, photos of activities, projects, photos of projects, brochures from field trips, lots of times unschooling and relaxed homeschoolers keep a journal or lists of field trips and activities, so that you don't forget. A list of books that your kid has read or that you've read together can often give a lot of information, because all those books you read about different science topics that you talked about, but you didn't actually write anything down, like that's documentation of the learning there. And then there's conversation as we talk about and look at what you brought. Yeah, so there's, and people can do similar things for portfolio too.
And if you could pop your email in the chat, Rebecca, so that they'll have that in case they want to call on you. And you're up north, right? Are you in Montpelier area? Where are you?
I'm in Plainfield, so yeah, outside of Montpelier.
Cool. And I'm down in Proctor, so the like Rutland County and the edges and stuff, it's really easy for me to get to. But also if you call Department of Ed, they have a list of people who do homeschool assessments. But you know that we are into unschooling, so call us.
And it looks like Katie Lane Carnes is on this too, and she also does end of year assessments for unschoolers. So maybe she'll put her contact info in the chat as well.
Nice.
Yeah, can I just say, if you don't want to, because I think, you know, and this is particularly for those big families out there. When I came 4 years ago, I came from a state where there was no government oversight. So there wasn't anything you had to do. And then I arrived in Vermont, and then, you know, you just have to show something. And the idea of doing, you know, like it would have been 5 teacher assessments. You know, some people have big families, and so you're just like, well, you might want to, by the time you get all the work together for 5 of those kids and go and sit in front of someone, sometimes you've actually got the stuff you need just to put a portfolio together. So I just want to put that out there for people that, you know, sometimes it's difficult, particularly if you've got a kind of an age span, to get there, sit in front of someone, and with 5 or more children, sometimes you just might as well slap something together yourself. So I just want to put that out there for anyone who.
Yeah. There's different choices. Absolutely. Check it out and try what works for you. Somebody asked about Singapore math. I think Julia and Sue use Singapore math. Do you want to talk about that?
Do you want to go first? Or, oh, she's muted. I would say I chose Singapore math right from the start. Like I knew that if I was going to get a curriculum that I had researched it before they even started. My kids had never been, oh, look at that. My kids have never been in public school. Actually, their first public school was college. And so, what do I want to say? I want to make it short. Singapore math, I had 2 girls. I was determined because I had a horrible math experience being a woman in school. And I was determined that, and then I found out when I got into college, this woman teacher, she's like, you should have majored in math. I'm like, pfft. So my biggest influence on homeschooling was to get the math straight. So I was doing, and I found that Singapore math was the kids that it was actually developed by the government of Singapore, which is great at turning out mathematicians, engineers, all that. Terrible human rights, but they have great math. And so it's workbooks there's a workbook. It's not they might have online programs now, but it's a workbook and a textbook. It teaches basically like old math. It doesn't have anything to do with new math. And it does a lot with visual spatial stuff. And they go from 1 to grade 6. And then the 6th, they don't use them as grades. It's books. There's 2 books per year. And they go up to 6 levels, I should say. And I think if you have a visual spatial kid, if you have a kid who has difficulty with math, the only thing I would say that about it is that it's really difficult to start it from, say, like level 2, 3, 4, or 5, because it basically builds on itself, and because it teaches kids math in a visual spatial sort of and also old way of doing math, although it's very hip. And it talks about Asian fruits a lot. So they learn a lot about Asian fruit.
There also is a middle school series. It's just got a different name, but there is.
Yeah, it's not true Singapore math though. Yeah, you found that out too, Laura. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and also that transition between 6A, 6B, and then on from there, I think back can sometimes be difficult for people because there's like it feels like it branches off, and that's when I was like, oh, I don't know if it's.
Yeah, it felt different.
There was a different. I don't know. I just felt like from 1 to 6.
Yeah, 1 through 6. I would say if you're going to do it, try to start with it, and don't be. Say you have a 4th grader who's really having difficulty in math. Start at the first book.
Right.
You don't have to.
I wanted to say it can be a little confusing because I'm going to show you this one, if everybody can see that. But it actually says level 2B, but then it also says grade 3. So you actually start with a 1B, a 1A, and then a 1B, and that's really 2nd grade in their minds here in the States to try to understand.
I think Asian is a year older. They count their birthdays differently.
So when you go to order the book, you can actually take a sample online to see where you think your child is at, and then proceed from there. But I'm still using it, and they're inexpensive. They're under $20.
Yeah.
So I mean, I thought they're cheap. They're very cheap. And
they're
my
great. Kids like them.
Look at this. I mean,
my kids really enjoyed them.
Yeah, they love them. I'm doing it with my granddaughter now.
Oh, you
It's the
are?
only thing I bought. So yeah, that's why I have this one. She's second grade, but we're doing third grade because that's where she was at. But it's just like, I was like, ran quick to the computer and said, okay, we got to have Singapore math. Didn't even try anything else with her because I knew her style and I knew this was going to work for her. But I think that comes with, you know, a lot of people are using Oak Meadow, and that can be similar, but yet it's different. And I didn't feel like it moved as quickly for my boys that wanted it and needed it. So because I was a big Oak Meadow fan in the beginning of life.
I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Also, that I wouldn't, for people out there listening, before everyone goes out and goes, Singapore math, that's the thing. Because I can see that happening, because I'm thinking, understand there are different kinds of math. There are, you know, you've got sometimes, what are they called? You've got a mastery kind of math, and then you've got a spiral kind of math.
Core math, right.
So I mean, so Singapore is actually, it's quite specific. So if that doesn't work for your child, but the whole world seems to be doing it, that's fine. You know, find something that works for your child. So, you know, it might not be Saxon, it might be, or it might not be Life of Fred, which is very, very wordy, but does work for some kids. So if
that's a great point.
out there and they're hearing, you know, maybe just one thing, don't just assume that if it doesn't work for your kid, there's something wrong with your kid. It's just, it's kind of quite a specific kind of math. And there's a lot of things out there. Math Mammoth is also out there. That's quite good. And if you really need to just put a CD in and go, you've got, there is Math UC and teaching textbooks. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, a curriculum that you kind of, you know, you do well, you stick with it. You know, just put your kid where they need to be if that's the case, but you don't have to do something because, oh my gosh, everyone's talking about this.
What a great point. That's a great point. I just looked in.
Lots of the math curricula have samples on their websites. So and Math Mammoth particularly, you can download a whole slew of samples to try. But a bunch of them, you can see what it looks like and try a few pages out, you know, before you decide to buy something.
Right, because different things just work for different kids, or not at all. Or it changes.
Yeah, that's count on that, actually, that it will probably change.
But it's the anxiety that you want to avoid. You want to avoid kind of any math anxiety, I think, by making more of a thing of the math than it needs to be. And I hear you, Julia, about what you're saying about with math. I've been very keen with, particularly my daughters, that it shouldn't be, you know, a major stumbling block. And that's probably got more to do with me and all the stuff I went through at school. My kids, they do math, you know, or they don't, but it's not, you know, it's not anxiety inducing for them.
Yeah. We did have some anxiety, I would have to say, when we got to long division. And I resisted getting a book. This was my first daughter, who actually ended up going to school and majoring in math in her undergrad. But when she hit the long division in Singapore math, I mean, this is just to support what you're saying as far as like when it doesn't work, you really, so I you mean, you really have to just step back and not cause any anxiety. We actually just, when she had tears trying to figure it out, and then I was trying to find all these visual spatial ways, because I already knew she was a visual spatial kid at that point, on doing long division, and she was in tears. I'm like, okay, we're just put it away. And we didn't do math for like 9 months.
Right.
And then I found this book. She was like 9 maybe. So it might have just not been right. So I found this book that I resisted like all hell, because I did not like the marketing trappy things on the front of it, but it was a book written by Donica McKellar called Math Doesn't Suck.
Yeah.
And it had all these kitschy things like, you know, how not to break a nail, you know, and I was just like, oh, but this lit her on fire. It's a fabulous book. And she just like, after that, the girl was on fire about math because of this one book by Donica McKellar, who I guess has a PhD in math. But she's also this famous actress that I didn't know about because we never watched TV. But that was just a lesson in saying that, you know, sometimes things that worked just all of a sudden are a disaster, and then just don't be so quick to push harder or whatever. When I saw the tears, I was like, okay, let's not do math, for a while. Let's put this aside. And we didn't do math. But I found the book maybe about 4 or 5 months later. Mm-hmm. And then she had a second book. And then she went off to major in math. So, which is crazy.
We have a couple of questions from the chat I want to jump to. But obviously we could talk about that just forever. Somebody asked about whether they're worried about they don't want to socialize or like be with other kids till after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like, how are you guys dealing with it? Do you feel like they're being overly cautious? How are you dealing with it?
I mean, I wanted to bring that up because I'm thinking there's a lot of school people out there, and we've all been talking and reminiscing about, oh, we did this with this group and that group, and I'm thinking that's not necessarily sensitive to the time we're living in. And right. For my, maybe you don't want to get together in a pod. Maybe that's just not where your level of comfort is, and that's not okay with your family. My family's pretty much shut down. Like, my kids haven't seen their friends for 6 months. It's been really hard. We'll Zoom in for birthdays and things, but that's the reality of the way that we're living. And it is hard because I'll go into Montpelier and they're just, woo, kids everywhere and masks on or not. But, that's what our family's doing. And I just really want to be sensitive to the people that are out there. If you feel that that's right for your family, then,
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of jump in here because I have the 7-year-old. And so what we have started doing, I have a little dog that's a therapy dog that's passed all her little tests and all her training. And we used to go to nursing homes. We'd go to Castleton University for suicide prevention time once a week, blah, blah, blah. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually doing Zooms with the dog, and other homeschoolers can log into the Zoom and read to us, like story time, but reading time. So the dog sits with me in the chair and they're reading to the dog. And I've made several little chats with the dog where the dog talks. I think Rebecca has seen them as well. Where the dog talks about Vermont history. We talked about nature. We talked about the tree frogs. We've talked about I can't even begin to, whatever. But so we've been doing Zooms, and I've just made them fun with the dog. There's an app, or with the team of oxen, with the horses. And so the horses are telling their story. We have Irish Dexter cattle. So the Irish Dexter cow talked about Ireland and the history of Ireland. So we've been doing these
You're amazing.
where other kids get on, and it's been fun. Can they get together in person? No, it's not really happening. But we're trying to make it happen on Zoom in a really fun way where they don't even realize they're learning. It's almost like we're on a field trip. So I have a Morgan horse. The Morgan talked about being a Morgan horse, Justin Morgan. And then we talked about maple syrup back in the springtime and how that, whatever. So you can find really creative ways to socialize for our kids. And it's not actually like going on the internet and doing schoolwork.
Right.
So I just have to keep coming up with ideas that the dog can do with them. And they're just like, they're really into it. And they're like, they can't wait tomorrow again at 10 o'clock. Will be our next time online. But that seems to be working. And I'm sure other people have some great ideas on what they're doing. And if we all put it together out there, we can make this thing really be a positive time and not just think, gee, we can't get together with our friends. So this has been a really fun thing. Kids don't even begin to think that they're learning, and they're actually giving me ideas on things. Last week, one said, "Well, how come how come the leaves turn colors this time of year?" And I kind of looked at the dog and I said, "Do you know why the leaves turn?" So we just went with it, So it's been really fun. Might work for other people as well. You don't really need to use a dog that talks, but it's an app piece where the real dog is actually talking. And it's really cute. But anyways, it's our little dog, and somebody said, "That voice sounds a little bit like you, Miss Sue." And I said, "Well, you know how someone might have a parrot and they teach their parrot to talk?" It's kind of similar to that. Yeah, the dog does sound a little bit like Miss Sue, but they're still loving it. They're like with their little mouths open, like, So we just have to get creative. And it can be a hard time, but it can be a fun time. I developed a little game that some people have. I've passed out. Actually, we have a great graphics art place in Rutland. It's called Awesome Graphics, actually. So I made I'm kind of an artist a little bit. So I made a two-sided game board. That's sort of like Chutes and Ladders in a way, but we change it up constantly with like history, science, and what poetry. We've done a lot of little pieces, and I changed the lily pads out, and the kids all have a board at their house, and we have a board here and a dice, and we shake, and they use whatever they want to use for a little marker, and then they will land on a lily, and they have to, like, the lily will say whatever, and they have to then, if they know the answer, great, and if they don't, somebody else in the group shares it, and we weave our way through to the top. So that's been really fun. That started out as something I did for foster kids because they were not able to see their birth parents. And it was really sad to go online and chat with their birth parents, and most of them ended up just crying because they couldn't see them in person. The birth parents sometimes most of the time have a difficult time themselves, things in their lives. So I made this game board up for them. And so the kids were like, land on this lily pad and make a funny face or make a funny sound or sound like a duck, or depending on the age, I had different ones. But the birth parents were like, "Oh, this is so good," because the kids were so happy and we played and it gave them some. So that's where it kind of started back in the 1st of April. And then I just turned it into a homeschooling thing. So it's kind of taken off from there. And thank you, Awesome Graphics in Rutland on Woodstock Avenue, because they have printed me, I think, like 300 game boards at this point for free. So they're wonderful. I went to them and I said, "I don't have a lot of money. What's this going to cost me?" And they looked at it and they said, "How many do you need?" And I'm like, "Oh, I need 100 or 200 or so." He's like, "Okay, no problem. And come back when you need more." I'm like, "Are you serious?" So it was wonderful. Yeah. So there's ways to make this fun and be with your friends online. Besides the typical, I think some kids have, like Minecraft going on and they're playing with each other online and all of that stuff. But some parents are not wanting that for their children. And so this kind of works. Another piece.
So,
You have something else?
yeah, I just wanted to say, so when we were all staying home in the spring, my daughter was super lonely. She's an only child. She's really social. She's 13. So once the weather got warm, we did start doing some outdoor physically distanced socializing and have continued that through the summer, and Pachem's classes have been all outdoors. So we've gotten really used to the stay 6 feet apart, wear masks if you need to, kind of socializing. And my experience has been, obviously the age of the kids is a factor, but for preteens, young teens, it seemed to me that when they're, when it's one-on-one, they're pretty great about keeping the distance and remembering and reminding each other. And then the more kids you add, the harder it is. But these parenting choices are really hard right now, I feel like. But if people are wanting that face-to-face connection, or if you feel like your kid needs it, I think outdoor is really the way to go. And I'm hoping we can keep doing that through the winter. And if we meet people to go cross country skiing or sledding from a distance, like that's still going to provide that in-person contact that I feel like my kid really needs. You know, she did have a lot of online contact in March and April, and it still was just super hard for her. So we've tried to facilitate the outdoor socializing in ways that feel safe to everyone. And you have to have a lot of conversations with other parents that can feel awkward, you know, to find out what everyone's comfortable with and to tell people what you're comfortable with. And that's like just where we are right now.
Yeah. Another question that has come up. What about the diploma? Did you have any struggles with your kid not having a formal diploma and entering into college?
Yeah, I think, okay, this is how we did it. So I sent them to community college, and they did dual enrollment, and I think Jonah, my oldest, maybe that was 10th grade. So that's 2 free classes. And then he went on to early college, and early college is basically supposed to be your 12th grade year, but you do a full load of college for a year. And that is paid for by the state. So that's free. So you get a year of college for free. Then what happened was he just transferred that, applied for college, and he transferred that. So because I think by that time he had about 2 years of college under his belt, that wasn't a problem. This whole diploma thing, I do remember before he went to community college, I had to come up with a transcript where I basically just sat down. I said, okay, these are the things you did. You know, and I also need to mention that I do have a spreadsheet where I've got each child's name and whatever projects that they did. And I do that so that at the end of this whole journey, I can literally just look back and I go, well, that's just totally English composition. Oh, a bit of French. Yes, we can do that. And then you can grade it. And I just asked him, I said, what grade would you have given yourself? And he's like, you know, oh, so we did that. And we came up, so a transcript, that was it. And that's what we sent to the college. And then he just transferred the credits he had, and it wasn't a problem. And my daughter's now doing the same. But if you're not going to transfer, for example, if they wanted to go to med school, I might not send them to community college because those science classes, for example, might not transfer to the institution that they want to go to. So do check in advance. What does my kid want to do? What institution do they want to go to? And what do I need? But it's all perfectly doable. And don't stick your kid back in school if that's not really where they want to go because you think it's somehow going to be easier. That's not necessarily the case. I don't know if that answers.
No,
So
that's great.
we've had different experiences. We use Green Mountain College, which no longer exists, sadly. So they just like opened their arms and said, sure, come on. And it was great. And then they closed, and my son transferred over to Castleton University. Big shocker. They said, oh, well, where's his diploma?
I know,
like,
right?
well, here's his transcript. He has, I think he had about, yeah, I think he had like, oh, he had a lot of, I mean, he had like 30 some odd, 40, I don't know. He had a lot of credits at that point. And I'm like, you're worried about a diploma? And he has all these credits, which did not all transfer over. Let me just say, I think like 15 did.
Right.
But that was okay. But I still said to them, what about, like, what does this mean then? You know? And they're like, well, we still have to have a diploma. And I'm like, okay, I'll be right back. And I left there. I drove to Rutland. I went to Staples. And they have this really nice card stock that has a seal on it. Or you had to buy the seal, actually. But it had all, you know. So I came home. I went online. I put on what I wanted. I slid it through the copy machine. I still on it. I signed it. I took it back over and going, here's this diploma. And they're like, okay, thank you very much. And I even bought the really pretty little navy folder that's, you know, like you'd really get it. You know, they're like, oh, thank you. Yeah, that's all we needed. And I'm thinking, seriously, $6 later. You know, it was simple. but I was like,
I've-
I felt like I was pulling something over their eyes, but honestly, I knew he could do the work. And so I'm
Well,
like,
and-
okay, you want a diploma? I'll give you a diploma. And I signed it
My
myself.
Yeah, I did
Right,
that.
and-
I forgot.
I have made those up for families.
Yeah, I did. I forgot. We did actually do
Because
that.
when you create a diploma for your child and you sign it, what you're saying is that they met your requirements for high school graduation. So you can do that. If anybody wants to say, who the heck are you? What authority do you have? They can, but
Join your homeschool, or it's the Yum homeschool, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah, we did. And it does feel like it's just like, because if you kind of juxtapose that with friends and what they're going through,
Right.
and his best friend had to do SATs, AP classes, clipping out of this, that, and the other, all of these things, and like I'm just like literally writing up a transcript, and his dad came up with a diploma. That's what I forgot. A beautiful diploma. And
Wow.
is this really going to be enough? And it's just, it worked. So
Yeah, they're looking for, they want to just be able to check their box off.
yes.
And
Absolutely.
neither of mine have diplomas. I just badgered and I just badgered the schools until they just left me alone. I should have just printed the diploma. But Castleton, I mean, Leah's now declared her major and is a sophomore, and I have a transcript. It's a legit transcript, but neither of my kids have diplomas, and one of them's in masters in Alberta. It doesn't, that's my advice about you can move around anything.
Yeah.
If you think you're stuck on any kind of administrative thing, go find Laura or Susan or one of us, because we've been able to move around it. It's not that we're trying to jinx the system. It's just the system is broken.
It is broken. And I do think what we're going through right now, I don't think that these colleges are going to keep putting any obstacles in the way of students. Let's be quite honest right now. I mean, they are suffering. So, go in there and get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and don't, hold back. And I know Vermont Tech, when my daughter wanted to go, I mean, they, with open arms, they were just absolutely, they met her personally, because there aren't many women in STEM, and there certainly aren't many women of color in STEM, certainly not in Vermont. So they were like, whoa, and so I'm just like, okay, but then what's the deal? Because don't put obstacles in our way. And I just don't think colleges are going to be doing that right now. They're just not in a position to do that.
The landscape is changing dramatically.
Absolutely.
And in terms of the transcript piece, I saw there was a question about it in the chat. There are a lot of resources online for creating a transcript for your high school student. But really what you're looking at is just sort of keeping track of what your child is doing and thinking, okay, what course can we call this? They spend a bunch of time doing X, Y, or Z. It had a cohesive topic or subject. Let's give this course a name. Let's figure out how many credits, and let's document that on the transcript.
Exactly.
And you can do that without having to structure your learning all that dramatic, differently than what you would normally do. It just takes a little thought.
And I think just look to see, I mean, because for me, I didn't go to school here. I went to school in England. So I had to kind of look online and go, okay, what are they expecting to see for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade? And just kind of look online and go, oh, because I didn't know what. Yeah, I didn't know. And then I was like, okay, so we can do that. And just basically look at what they're asking for. And because some people actually do come up with a narrative that doesn't look like that, that is also something you can do. It might not necessarily be what you have to do, but they do kind of come up with some kind of portfolio. And, if that's what your college wants, then, think about that as well. You don't have to do that, but definitely go online and just follow there's like a rubric free out there. It's not hard.
Yeah, that's what
And
I
if
did for
you're-
Leah.
And if your kid's looking at a really competitive college, then you probably want to be able to write a course description for each course that you're putting on there, so that you can list the text that they're using and give some indication of the level of
Right.
work.
You need to do that. But that's what I
But
mean
work
by
for
know
people.
where your kid wants to go. Think of just, if your kid knows, then just work towards that. And if they don't, that's okay too. But, I mean, it's not like there's any kind of limitation or statute of limitation on time. They can always learn, they can always go. So it's not like it all has to be done in 4 years. And then you have to know.
Especially right now. This is not a great time to go to college. Take your time.
My daughter will attest to that. She's
Wait until it's normal again.
But really, because I'm thinking to myself, I kind of knew years back that my oldest would be in this watershed moment. Nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody believed me. And then I'm thinking, well, boom, coronavirus was the catalyst. The landscape of higher education in 5 or 10 years is going to be completely different
yes.
for my little kids.
Absolutely.
So sweating over that is pointless. It's just pointless, because they're going to have to be seismic shifts.
Well, the hard part is that it's for one style learning at the moment when they're doing it online.
Yeah.
For so many of our kids. I mean, my son's a junior at Castleton, and he's like, I really hate this online. If I'd wanted to do online, I would have done online. And for kids that maybe so he is hearing impaired. It's very difficult for him to do online classes when you're hearing impaired. And he never really realized that until he had to do online classes. And he's doing okay. He's not struggling in his classes, but I do see it taking him much longer on different projects. And yeah, it's not easy. And I've said to him, so he's in, junior year, so he's got 1 more year to go after this. And I said to him, just back off a little bit. You got the rest of your life.
Right.
So you go only part-time in the spring, because they've been really cramming. Like Julia can attest, they'll be out the weekend before Thanksgiving, and they don't go back until February 1st.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I know. They
Yeah.
took
For
away
Castleton
they took
University.
away all of their breaks,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
basically marathon online school for
Right. So they
13
started
weeks.
the second week in August or third week,
Yeah.
like the 18th or something, I think, or 15th, and they
Yeah.
run right straight through with no breaks. And then that weekend before Thanksgiving, and they're
done.
won't be coming back until the first week in February.
Oh, I wonder if that's because is anyone there going in person at Castleton?
No, not at this time.
Oh, they don't
No.
have any hybrid? I thought they had some.
I don't know. They're talking about going
Hybrid
to in
classes.
January,
A hybrid.
and they may have.
Colleges,
They may have.
the colleges don't
Nothing
want
that-
students going home for Thanksgiving
Yeah.
and
Right.
then coming back
Then
and
coming
going
back,
home for
right.
the holidays
Right.
and then coming
Yep.
back. So
Right.
they're either going remote for those weeks, or they're changing.
But we're not
the
even going
schedule.
remote. Yeah, we're
Right,
just
it
done.
sounds like this place, but some places are just going remote from Thanksgiving through.
But most
I
of
don't know.
most of ours are remote at Castleton. At this
Yeah.
point, there's very, very few. There's a few nursing classes that need to be. They have some labs that they need to do in person, but
Oh, yeah.
the library is open there. But you need to kind of stand in line for that, and they'll bring you out the book you want. But yeah, it's challenging, very challenging.
I'm going to circle our wagons a little bit.
Yep.
Obviously, we're all having a wonderful time. We could talk all night. There was one question that wasn't answered, and it was about whether if someone has their kid out, it's a high schooler, and wants to have them able to get back into the school.
Yeah,
I've
I
actually dealt
saw
with
that.
a couple of people. Did you ask that question, or it was?
No, I saw that in there, and I have thoughts on that. But you sounded like you wanted to start, so.
I've dealt with a couple students trying to do this, and it's interesting because I know people in the schools that they're dealing with, and the schools are being the 2 schools I've dealt with are being very well, just have them try to keep up with the standards the best they can, and we'll see when we get there. And I think it's because they don't know what the hell they're doing.
No.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
That's probably
Rebecca, your
exactly.
thoughts?
Although in
Oh.
normal times, what I always tell people is that every school is different. So you got to check with the high school and find out how they handle this, because some places they want to, you know, test kids when they're coming back in to find out, are they ready for the next level of math? Or sometimes they want to see your work. Sometimes they want to see if you've had teacher assessments done, they want to see those. It just seems like it's every school's different, and you got to just reach out to them and say, we're homeschooling. If we want to come back in next year or the year after, what do you need to see from us to come back in at the corresponding grade level? And hopefully they'll have an answer for you. It sounds like they might not, but hopefully they will.
The two schools I've talked to that generally I've dealt with in the past, and like Patty, she had the experience where her daughter did have to test and then found out she was doing fantastic and she could go right into 10th grade. I just think because there's so many, I mean, this huge increase, and there's all these families that they're just like, we don't even have time for that, because like they're so overwhelmed.
Yeah. I would just say, save the work, save your work, like, you know, save the stuff just in case they want to see it, to show proof that your kid did whatever courses you're saying they did. Like, that's all I'd say, ask the school and save your work.
Yeah.
So I have a little experience with public school at the moment, only because I have a sister-in-law who teaches at Pulteney Elementary, and I have a daughter-in-law who teaches in Rutland. And elementary as well. And the situation in the Rutland County area right now is that for the first 2 months back in school, so we're just ending that second month now, or almost onto it, they're really not presenting anything new to their students. The first month was strictly spent in getting them into the picture of what they need to do, social distancing with the COVID, and mental health. Where are the kids mentally after being isolated? And then in October, they started just kind of feeling out, where are the kids standing now educationally? What did they lose from March until now? So when people say to me, oh, I'm homeschooling, I don't know if I'm doing enough, I'm like, hey, you're doing more than the public school's doing right now. Because right now they haven't actually started their real year yet. They are trying to play catch up from last year. But the first month was all about mental health for the kids. Where were they at with the crisis? And then this month has been just pretty much testing and seeing where they're at and where they need to start and move forward. So we're really, if you're worried about your new homeschooler and you're worried that you're not keeping up, or you're doing just great, because the public schools haven't even started this year. They've been there for 2 months, but they haven't actually started in the big picture.
Thank you all. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is so much information, so much insight, so much expertise. I'm really glad it's recorded, because I know that these are burning questions that people have, and you all have so much experience. Thank you so much for your time. And I think we could probably talk all night, and it flew by, but we're going to need to wrap it up for tonight. I just want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to meet you all.
Bye.
See you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Good night.